Oh, Michelle, I think you're muted.
Here we go again. Hi, thanks for that welcome and thanks for having me here today. Can everyone hear me? Awesome. Well, I'm super excited to be with you today and talk a little bit about decoding the models of nanny care. And while some of this information may not be new to you, I think you're going to have a new and unique perspective when it pulls it all together to really gain some insight and perspective into what really makes a long-term successful match. So I am Michelle LaRowe. I have been in the nanny industry for more than half my life, over 30 years at this point. I've got to be a nanny. I graduated with a degree in chemistry. I worked through school being a nanny. And after I graduated, I realized that was really what I loved to do. I went on from working as a nanny to be the executive director of the International Nanny Association, went on to be a managing partner in Longhorn Leads and manage our portfolio of nanny-related businesses, including Morningside Nannies, which is a Houston-based award-winning nanny agency. And then my baby, one of my favorite things to do is to train nannies, which we do through Global Nanny Training and nannytraining.com, two of our websites. And we currently have nannies in over 30 countries. So it's been great to kind of share some insight for them and really raise that standard in terms of a basic competency for those providing unsupervised in-home care. So that's a little bit about me. I live on Cape Cod. I have 5 kiddos. We recently adopted 3 through foster care. So we're a busy family, and I really have a new perspective myself on the importance of high quality care. So let's dig in and we will get going. And I hope you come away with a few things that we'll review as we go through. So you all know that every job isn't right for every family. And we always talk about fit, right? The fit is what makes those jobs last. And why does that matter? Because when there's the fit, it leads to greater job satisfaction, increased job performance, and workplace longevity. And when we decode these 3 models of nanny care that we're going to talk about, and when we find that the nanny's care and the family's care models align, that's really decoding that fit that we talk about so often. You know when you're going to know, but why? And it really comes down to fit, which is driven by the model of care. So when we're looking for fit, those tangibles that we screen nannies and families for and that nannies look for and families look for are easy, right? It's easy to match up on duties, hours, pay. Those are essential. Those are, objective criteria. But when we talk about that fit, again, what do we really mean? It's that understanding of the intangibles. And one intangible is really this model of care. And I first learned about models of care back in the early 2000s when a research paper came out about how parents, how moms especially, view the kind of care that they desire for their kiddos. And as we applied that to nanny care, I really felt like there were some parallels, and we were able to draw this sort of 3 separate boxes that both nannies and families fit in that will help make the great match. And the intangibles, the thing that really drive the fit when we talk about, did you make that connection, really come down to preferences, expectations, and comparing and contrasting them to ensure that the nannies and the families align. That's really the secret to long-term fits and great matches. So today, when you walk away from this webinar, I'm really going to hope that the objectives are achieved, which are, you're going to learn the 3 overarching models of nanny care. You're going to learn to evaluate what model of care best aligns to a nanny's practice. You're going to learn to align what model of care best aligns with the family's expressed care need. And you're going to learn why matching on models really impacts success. Whoops. Let me hit. I was trying to close my my Zoom box over here. Hold on one second. And for outcomes, we're going to identify the key components of each model of care. We're going to identify what model a nanny best aligns with based on her components of practice. We're going to learn to identify what the family fits in terms of their model based on their express care need, which we all know isn't necessarily reality once we get into learning what the family's needs are and how to decipher that. And then to identify ways in which matching models impacts long-term success. So when we talk about tangibles in the job, we're talking about those things that are locked. Those are how many children a family has. What's the location of the position? What are the duties and responsibilities in the role? What is the compensation like? What's the schedule like? Does the family have any pets? We're thinking about the tangibles, those things like, does the nanny have to be able to swim with the family because the family has a pool? What are the main skills and functions that are locked in each job in terms of the tangible aspects of the position? Then we have the fit. Those are the intangibles, and the fit unlocks the tangibles for success, right? So what are some of these intangibles and how do they fit? And when we look at them, we sort of have three baskets, and these are the models of care. We have a custodial model, and that's really when the nanny's role is limited to meeting the children's physical and emotional needs during their parents' absence. So the parents really manage the children's day. They ask the nanny to execute based on their preferences and their schedule. And the nanny really doesn't have input into the ongoing development of the kids, their schedules, their activities. You know, people who play that custodial role often feel the need of a babysitter. They feel the need of a short-term care. They don't really have a voice in the ongoing development of the kids and what the schedule looks like. They're really executing what the parents' preferences and focused on the here and the now, in the moment type of care. Then we have the coordinated care model, and that's the model where the nanny really comes into the family as a team player. The nannies who engage in this model of care are viewed as professionals who contribute to the family. The nannies have a voice, the families want to hear that voice, they work together. Oftentimes the nanny can be a full charge nanny, where she really works with minimal supervision and oversight, but checks in with the parents on the global view of the family and makes those micro decisions on a day-to-day basis once she understands the family's, worldview, the family's view of the nanny in her role. And then we have the surrogate model of care. And that's really when the nanny almost assumes that role of a primary caregiver. We see the surrogate model a lot with families who travel extensively, where the nanny really becomes almost that guardian style of care. We see it with families who work have military families, and the nannies work while the parents are on leave. Or we see this in, really high net worth families sometimes, where the nanny really takes on that primary caregiver role and is almost backwards in the sense that the nanny instructs the family on the schedule, the duties, the responsibilities of care when the family is with the children, because the nanny really fills that primary role. So what happens sometimes is we fall into that thought process of right or wrong. Is this right for this model of care? Is it right for a nanny to be in that model where she doesn't talk to the family and she really does everything except for checking in on a day-to-day basis? Is it really a nanny if the nanny is operating based on objectives for the day only, and the family sets the schedule and the routine and the responsibilities and she's executing them? We sometimes get into this right or wrong thinking, but that's really not the question. It's not a question of, is a model right or wrong? It's a question of, do the nanny's model and do the family's model match? So I remember back to being a nanny myself, and we used to joke, I would say, kids, keys, credit card, I will see you on Friday. I have the week planned. Here's what we're doing. Here's when we're going to check in. Here's how things are going. And that's how we work. Now, would that work for any family, for every family? It would not. I was put on a retainer for 6 months for a job after that for a family who thought they wanted that model. They thought they wanted the full charge nanny who did her thing during the week and sort of checked in here and there. But we got into it, and that is not what they wanted. They wanted to micromanage, which is fine. Again, it's not a question of right or wrong. It's a question of fit. That didn't work with the model of care that I worked in effectively, so the job didn't last. So when you look at fit It's really when the model of the nanny care that the nanny approaches and works well in equals the model of the family that the family wants. So if a family wants a full charge nanny, and a nanny is a nanny that likes the family to provide lots of input, likes to go into a job where she's really executing the family's wishes, it's not going to work. And vice versa. If a nanny likes to go on outings and activities and really wants to embrace her role and develop the curriculum and how the day goes and all of that, and the family likes to micromanage, it's not going to work. And what really drives the fit in the models is the role the nanny plays in the family. So when we look at components of fit, the things that we're looking at are management style. So some nannies work really well when they're micromanaged, others don't. Others want complete free reign except for that check-in. And many families in the coordinated model agree that once the nanny understands what the family's viewpoint on things, she can make those day-to-day decisions. Other parents don't want the nanny making decisions. They want to check every single box before the nanny does anything. Again, it's not a question of right or wrong. It's, does the nanny want to work in that capacity and in that model? And does the family want that model? So management style, outings and activities. Again, some families, especially first-time parents, have the idea that the nanny will never leave the home. Other nannies spend very little time in the home. They're doing outing activities, maybe come home for a nap. If the idea and the model in terms of what the nanny works best in and what the family wants doesn't line up, the match is not going to be there. Routine and structure. Some nannies really like the routine. They like the structure. At every day, they come into work, the kids have breakfast, nap times at 10, nap times at 1, lunch is in the middle. We go out of the house and do our activities in the morning. The afternoon, we stay home and play. If the family is more fly by the seat of their pants and they don't want the child home for set naps every day, that they want to feed when they're hungry, as they're older, we're not talking about babies, that the nanny sort of has to go along with what every day brings, it's not going to work. Some nannies like to have, you know, freedom in terms of not having routine and structure. They like to fly by the seat of their pants, and the family has a very rigid expectation around routine and structure. If the models don't match, the fit's not going to be there. Child rearing approach. Some families are attachment style parenting and they still want a nanny and they want that nanny to embrace the attachment style, for example. If a nanny has a different style, you know, tough love, you know, independence driven, wants to, you know, have firm boundaries and direct consequences, and the family is into gentle parenting, or we don't say no, that fit is not going to be there. I remember I worked for a child psychiatrist, and one of the rules was you could not say no to the children. You could not use the word no. That job for me did not last. And had I known going into it, I would not have taken that job. But back then I didn't really know. And I'm hitting the button again. Let me go back. Where's my screen? Communication style again. Some families want their nanny to be off their phone, but at the same time want their nanny to text them pictures and communication and updates throughout the day. Some families and nannies have a check-in time that they check in each and every day at a set time. Other nannies and families have a debriefing at the end of each day. Some meet, you know, once a week on Fridays. If the communication style and frequency isn't in the same spectrum as what the nanny wants and the family wants, it's not going to fit. Another one, worldview. We often shy away from talking about this because it can be political or it can be religious. But the reality is that if you're providing care in a family's home for 60 hours a week, what you deliver and who you are is going to seep into your job, and what the family has is going to seep into the environment the nanny works in. So while if you have a worldview and you are atheist and the family is Christian, and part of your duties and responsibilities is to pray with the child every day, to say grace before meals, after a while, that may rub you the wrong way when the kids are old enough and they start asking questions that you're not comfortable answering. You have to sort of consider, if you are a diehard Republican and that family is a Democrat, you may think you can put those things to the side. But when it comes to election season and you realize comments are made and they put you in an awkward situation, how is that going to resolve long term? Does it open the door to conflict that you would not need to be in? It's something to think about and something to consider. And again, not a question of right or wrong. It's a question of long-term fit. If you don't agree, or at least aren't on the same page in terms of worldview, is there a potential for long-term fit? And when the babies, when you're caring for a baby, maybe that doesn't matter. But when you're caring and providing care for kids who are school aged, in these discussions that impact worldview, religion, abortion rights, those things come up. I have 2 teenagers. They happen. If you don't have the same worldview as the family, how is that going to play out long term in terms of your comfort level in the role and the family's comfort level in the role? Are comments going to be made that rub you the wrong way? For example, as a placement specialist in our agency, we placed a nanny in a role. The family was very thrilled. The nanny was very thrilled. The nanny arrived on day 2 with a short sleeve t-shirt. She had a tattoo. The family didn't like that tattoo. They felt it wasn't respectful and that she wasn't honoring the temple of her body. They terminated the nanny simply for the tattoo. Do I agree with that? Absolutely not. But had the family been upfront, again, about their expectations in terms of what the nanny would have to live out and do during her day, which for this family was attending the country club, wearing specific swimsuits that they want her to wear, etc. Maybe we could have avoided that, or maybe it wouldn't have been an awkward situation, because that would have came out during the screening process in terms of the family's thoughts on those types of things. And again, we're not talking about discrimination practices as an agency. You should not work with families who want to discriminate, all of that. I am talking about worldview, how the family sees their world, what their slant is on the world, what the nanny slant is. Again, not right or wrong, but are they going to match? Because if they're not, at some point there is going to be a rub. And it can, if you don't need to have a rub, why do so? And again, these sort of happens when there's extremes in terms of the family and the nanny being on totally different pages. Relationship. This is a big one. Does the nanny want to be part of the family, or does the nanny want to be an employee where she leaves her job at Friday? She doesn't have to go to birthday parties, events, isn't pressured to do date nights and all those things? Or is the family wanting that nanny to be part of the family, or do they want to have a direct employee relationship? I remember working a job where the family had several nannies, and they were like, it's our rule that you don't kiss the children, that you're not affectionate with the children. If the children come to hug you, you're not to hug them. Again, for me, like that was during the interview process, that was not going to be a fit for me, right? Because my view is kids need love and affection, and the family didn't want the caregivers to provide that. So if you're a nanny that's, touchy feely, huggy, and the family is not that type, is that relationship expectations going to match up? And it really comes true with the part of the family. Are you part of the family, or are you not? And we all know, who have been around a long time, you're part of the family until you're not. But during that job search and during that fit process, it's important to consider what the expectations of the relationship, and does the nanny's model of a relationship align with what the family wants for a model of the relationship? And then decision maker. That's a big one. Again, does the family want the nanny making decisions? Some families, they want the nanny to call them every 5 minutes with every decision. Other families are like, they expect you to be able to make those micro decisions once you understand the worldview. For some nannies, they're not comfortable making decisions for the children ever. I interview nannies all the time, and I'm often surprised we talk about discipline. How do you approach discipline? How do you guide behavior? I do what the parents want. Well, if you're in a situation and the parents aren't there, what are you going to do? The number of candidates that say they're going to call the parents is flooring to me, right? Like, you have to know what your approach is so you can determine if it aligns with the parents' approach to discipline. Because again, if you're a gentle, parent, and you are only positive, you don't want no, you don't want any negative consequences, and you're a nanny that maybe still does time out, that's not going to be a match. So these are some of the things that determine fit. In really those intangibles. These are intangibles that we talk about. They're not things that you can check a box and say, yes, you have to work 8 to 6. Yes, Monday through Friday only. These are the intangibles, and the intangibles drive the role, which drive the fit. So again, when you're looking at these fit factors, the role the nanny plays goes from a restrictive role to a least restrictive role. So the most restrictive role is that custodial care model. And again, that's where the parents provide daily guidance. They might be micromanagers. They don't want the nanny in a decision-making role. The focus is on the immediate needs, the day-to-day, and the nanny has a limited voice. Then we go to the middle of the road, coordinated model, where the nanny and the parents are team players. There's a collaborative engagement. The environment is collaborative. The daily decision making of what's for lunch, where are we going to go today, what playground are we going to go to, those are left to the nanny. And the nanny really focuses on all the kids' needs: physical development, social, emotional, intellectual. And then she's, works independently, but has some oversight. So they check in, but the nanny doesn't have to call and check in on every little thing that comes up during the day. And the nanny's voice is valued. Often the time, the nanny has more experience than the parents, and the parents look to the nanny for guidance in terms of child development, milestones, what's appropriate and what's not. Then you have the least restrictive role, which is really that surrogate model where the nanny serves as the primary caretaker. She does the macro management. She has full decision making. She determines the needs of the children. She almost serves as the guardian and is the primary voice. So again, this is a scale, right? There's things that overlap. It doesn't necessarily all fit into one specific box, but when you look at the overarching type and model of care, you'll find that the families and the nannies sort of fit into one of these boxes. So how do you know where a nanny fits? So some nannies will tell you during the interview process, and you'll pick up on these things, that they like to independently plan their day. They want to go on outings. They want to go on activities. They want to go to the museum. They'll ask if the family has passes to go to the museum, if they have any memberships, and those type of things. You'll have other nannies who say they like to plan their day with the parents. They want to understand what the parents' goals are for the children, and they want to plan around that and work with the parents. Then you have other nannies who want a schedule and routine, and they simply want to execute it. They want to implement what the parents have in store. You have nannies that prefer ongoing daily communication with the parents. They want to text back and forth all day. Hey, here's a picture of us smiling and eating lunch. Here's some comments about this. Here's what we're doing right now. Then you have nannies who prefer minimal direct contact. They want to circle in with you once at the end of the day. You have nannies who are comfortable for making decisions for their charges without checking in with their parents. And you have nannies that want to check in with every decision. And then you have nannies that just simply won't make decisions without knowing exactly what the parents want first. And again, these really aren't right or wrong. It's not that the nanny who does it this way or the family who wants it this way is right or wrong. It's about finding that fit. And I think when we think in that mentality, we're able to have more successful searches with longer term placements. So how do you know what the family's looking for? Those job descriptions and the keywords that parents talk about can help you figure out how restrictive the role is that they want the nanny to play, where the nanny role fits in terms of these models of care, and where they sort of fall on the spectrum. So if you're speaking to a family and you're doing your intake, or if you're interviewing with the family, and the family talks about having the nanny follow their schedule, having a nanny that really respects the family's preferences, or is familiar with the Montessori approach, or familiar with the attachment parenting philosophy. If they share that they have lots of cameras in their home and they watch them daily throughout the day, if they're really looking for a nanny that follows their instructions, And if they want the nanny to sort of have a daily checklist and check off things as they go, they're going to be on the spectrum of that custodial care model. They want the nanny invested in the here and now, but they really don't want the nanny's input in terms of ongoing development. They want to be in control, and they want the nanny just to follow along with what the family has planned. If you're talking to a family and the job description says, they're looking for a team player, they want a nanny who takes initiative, a nanny who can work independently, a nanny that is part of the family, a nanny that's a good communicator and really has mutual respect in a give and take relationship. You're looking at the coordinated care model. And then if you're talking to a family and they talk about the parents traveling extensively, that they really need 24/7 coverage, that they have 3 or 4 nannies. I spoke to a family just the other day, and they were telling me they had 4 nannies, that they preferred the caregivers to put the nannies to bed until the children were 18 months old, and noticed it was the caregivers and not the parents. That they had a fully staffed home, that they had 4 vehicles, each nanny had their own vehicle, each child had their own nanny. They want open availability, which is really different than flexibility. They want the nanny to play a primary caretaker role and have complete oversight for the growth and development of their kiddos. That's going to align towards the surrogate model. And again, it's really not right or wrong. It's decoding what model the family fits in, what model the nanny works best in, and making sure those align. So why does this matter? Because the model determines the role in the family. For example, if the nanny wants to be like family and the family wants a strict professional, there's going to be unfulfillment and frustration. It doesn't match up. What the nanny gets from the job is not what she wanted to get from the job. Frustration happens when the models don't match up. So for example, the nanny plans to go on outings and the family doesn't want the nanny to leave home. That's going to be a point of frustration and job dissatisfaction for the nanny. And oftentimes the nannies don't realize this until they're in the role, because these intangibles really weren't part of the screening process. When the models don't match, the nanny will feel like she has a lack of purpose and unfulfillment in her job. Because if a nanny goes in and views herself as a child specialist, she feels that she is competent to plan the children's day, to come up with age-appropriate activities, to actively engage the kiddos in age-appropriate play, to plan outings that developmentally are appropriate. If she has all these ideas of how she's going to contribute to the raising of this child or the children in the family, and the parents just want the nanny to come in and stay home, check off the boxes for feeding and sleeping, play with the kids in the backyard, and that's it, the nanny is not going to be fulfilled or not going to have purpose in her work. And then you get burnout when the models don't match. A nanny becomes exhausted in her role when she's functioning in a role that she doesn't operate naturally in. So for example, when the nanny's trying to communicate with the parents, she's trying to open the door to have that weekly meeting. The nanny's trying to get the written agreement done. The nanny's trying to establish communication to get check-ins done so she knows what to expect and to get feedback from the family. And the family is not communicating back. It becomes exhausting and frustrating, chasing them down, having to ask for your paycheck, not being viewed as a professional when you view yourself as a professional. And then burnout happens because, again, the nanny lacks purpose, she's unfulfilled, and she's frustrated. So this matching based on models is so much more important than viewing something as right or wrong, because when you match on the models, you're looking at those intangibles, and those are what really build fit and build success. So you have your tangibles, which are the big funnel. Those are your concrete locked things in each job, each family's need. Then you have the fit, which are the intangibles. The fit, the model, where they are in terms of the role they play in the family. Those 3 things lead to long-term placement success. When the models match, which is determined and driven by the role, and the fit is there because the intangibles, the real subjective criteria has been evaluated, long-term matches are made. When they don't, the fit isn't there, there's a rub, and the long-term match just isn't there. So I know you've probably thought about bits and pieces of this, but perhaps you haven't pulled it all together in terms of some concrete thinking and takeaways that you can use when you're evaluating nannies for positions, when you're trying to understand what the family's needs are versus their expressed needs, when you're trying to make those matches. I hope this was helpful and gave you a different perspective to think on in terms of the role the nanny plays in the family, the model of care that the nanny operates best in and the family operates best in, the fit which drives those long-term successes. And I hope they give you a new way to incorporate matching into your process. So that's what I had for today. I see there's a chat box, so I'll open it up and see if there's any questions. And I don't see. Thank you. I'm glad that this is good. I'm just looking through. If you have questions, certainly take yourself off of mute and go ahead and ask. So Marilyn, do I explain these models of care to the family? I do. I do talk about models of care. Especially this comes up a lot when I have families who are looking for, I just had one the other day, they wanted a nanny that could serve as a governess, but who would also deep clean their home. Those models, those aren't going to line up, right? Because the nanny views herself as a professional, not a domestic worker. Again, it's not right or wrong. It's the role the nanny plays in the family. It's those intangibles, which really come down to value. So you're looking for one thing, but it sort of doesn't align with the duties and responsibilities that you're seeking. So let's talk about models of care, find out where you fit, find out where the nanny fits and sort of match that way.
Michelle,
Yeah.
sorry, Sarah Watkins here in Salt Lake City.
Hi.
Hi. So, do you have, or is there like a, there are like personality tests, things like that? Is there like a professional nanny questionnaire, something like that, like one of those personality type things that would show where the nanny best aligns with? I mean, I sometimes even when I'm talking to nannies, they're developing in their careers, and so they're not as like polished and articulate and know exactly, yes, I function best. But sometimes these other evaluation tools can refine it a little bit. Are there any that you suggest, or do you think that that's a good way to do it?
So a few things is that the nanny may not know what model she fits in, but as you're talking to her, you're going to know what model she fits in when she talks about things she likes to do on the job. Why did you like your last job? Oh, I love my job because I got to plan activities and outings with the kids. I loved being able to take them into the community and exploring their world. You know that nanny, if that was the best thing she loved about her job, she is not going to work well in a job that doesn't let the nanny leave the home. That's not going to bring her fulfillment. So you will get clues as you're talking to the nanny about what she values in terms of intangibles and what's important to her as she shares what brought her joy in her past jobs, what she's looking for in her current next position. One of the things we always ask is, and we ask both families and nannies this, tell me what you liked best about your most recent position. Tell me what you liked least about your most recent position. And that does give some insight. In terms of personality testing, we do at Morningside Nannies. We use Knowing Nanny. We also have it on eNanny Source, where agencies can purchase it and use to give to their nannies. It's a personality assessment. It helps it breaks it into categories in terms of the nanny's management style. Is she more task focused or more relationship focused? So it does give you a sort of spectrum of where the nanny falls on some of these intangibles. And we do share that with the families in an overview as part of our profile process.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
My pleasure. Marilyn, do we ask about worldview prior to placement? Would it enable discrimination? I don't think so, right? Because as you're talking to families, those families that are looking for specific things. So for example, like I said, we have families all the time, we're in Texas, that say they expect the nanny to pick the children up from Christian school, to take them to religious education, to facilitate their prayers before lunch. And if we find that that's important to a family and part of the duties and responsibilities, we include that in a job description. We state that, this family expects the nanny to facilitate prayers, read religious books, the skills and the tasks that are required. And if a nanny is not comfortable with that, she's not going to apply. That does not stop a nanny from being an atheist. If she's comfortable facilitating prayer, she can still apply and we would send them. So it's not so much that we're screening for a discriminatory factor. It's that what are the expectations of the family in this role? And is the nanny willing to fulfill those expectations? So she doesn't have to be Christian to apply for a family that wants the nanny to pick the kids up from Christian school, but she has to be willing to pick them up from Christian school, right? And you have some nannies that just won't step in a church from their background or whatever. And if that requires going in the church every day to get the kids out of school, that may not be a fit for them. So no, I don't think it's discriminatory because we're not screening based on their religious preference. We're screening on the duties and responsibilities that the nanny would take in. But I guess naturally a nanny wouldn't apply for roles that perhaps weren't comfortable for her. Just like we have families with pets. If a nanny is allergic to pets or a nanny doesn't want to work in a home with dogs, she's not going to apply. If the family has a pool and requires a nanny to swim, because, in Massachusetts, where I'm from, you have to have a fence around every pool. In Texas, you don't have to have a fence around any pool. So if you have a toddler and you have a pool, you're going to want a nanny that's not afraid of the water. Is that discriminatory? No, it's not a protected category. And the nanny, needs to be comfortable to jump in the water if the kid falls in. So I don't think it's discriminatory. But I think
Can I have
parents
a
are going to
follow-up question about that?
Yeah.
So what if the family, and I am in Texas. So what if a family says, I only want a Christian nanny?
So we tell that family that that's illegal. That's discrimination. Okay. We're not able to discriminate. You're not able, you can discriminate if you want, but be prepared for a headache if you do. I mean, certainly the laws are different because they're a household employer of one, but just because the laws are different doesn't mean that practice should be different, right? Because if you're going to, if you're going to raise your kids in an environment that expects, to be tolerant and welcoming of all people, then you sort of have to be yourself, right? So
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
tell the families, we have a no tolerance policy for that. So I have no problem with families who are asking for age is a big one, right? We always tell families that, we don't even track their age. We have their license, obviously their date of birth as part of their screening process. We don't include that on the profiles. We don't disclose that to the family. And that's another reason we don't use pictures in our profiles when we send to the family.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Does anyone else have any questions?
Someone has a question in the chat.
Let's see. How much time was again? Okay, how much time do allot for a family calls out? That's too long for a busy executive. Is there a way to fast track? So for us, it usually takes me 15 to 20 minutes on the phone with the family, if that. I've really, over time, been doing this for a long time now. So my application is really, it leads me to get the information that I need and know where to follow up. So my application is very strategic. I think the other thing is that I don't really talk to the families now until they register. So I'd rather have a lower registration fee where the families have to go through the effort to pay a minimal fee and fill out an application and then talk to them in terms of their job duties, responsibilities, and needs before starting their search. I'll talk to families who call in all day. I don't know. I'm a busy person. I love talking about this. So I'll take as long as it's needed because the work that we do upfront eliminates the problems later. So I'd much rather spend 20 minutes on the phone with the family, getting to the bottom and nitty gritty of this and setting expectations with them rather than be 3 interviews in and having nannies report that this family is absolutely crazy. Their expectations are all over the place. So I've had families that I've spent 2 hours talking to help guide their expectations and really help them to understand what's appropriate and what's not in terms of expectations for nannies, role and responsibilities. Because sometimes, like in Houston and Boston, I could just be like, you're crazy. Your nanny who is college educated isn't going to scrub your toilets. But I can't really say that to families in Houston. I have to, dance with them a little bit. What I'm hearing is that, you have 2 different roles and sort of, speak their language in terms of communication. but I mean, I'll take as much time as it needs, but we're really doing that deep intake only after they've paid and invested in doing the application. What is more helpful? What is more beneficial? Who is responsible for the nanny's taxes and health insurance, the parents or the agency? So it depends on your model, right, of operations. We're a nanny referral agency, so the family is the employer of the nanny. So the family is responsible for the nanny's taxes, and if they want to contribute to their health insurance premium, because they're not our employees. Some agencies, very few, but some do have it set up where they employ the nannies directly. Who is legally responsible if something happens to the child, the nanny or the agency? I think most agencies have insurance, or they should, that protects them against, you know, claims of omissions or incorrect information provided. I mean, I'm certain if you didn't, I'm not an attorney, so I really can't answer that in terms of legal terms, but I would think that you have an obligation to do what you say you're going to do as part of your screening process, and to clearly communicate what that means and what that doesn't mean to the families. I would say if you advertise to the families, you do a full background check, and then in reality, you just do a nationwide check. And this nanny has 3 issues that come up in counties related to you know, theft, and then the nanny goes and steals checks from her employer. I think you'd have some responsibility, right, because you didn't do what you said you were going to do. But in terms of the nanny having, if something happens to the child, I mean, I think it would be the nanny's fault, but that, just because it's fault doesn't mean they couldn't see you, and it's going to cost you a bunch of money and a headache. I think the best proactive and protective measure is to be clear with your families what screening you do and what screening you don't, and to absolutely have that conversation with families that these are data points, right? What they mean and what they don't mean. So every family that we work with, I have that conversation of what a background is. This report is data based on right here and right now. If the nanny went to Florida and had a crime at the county level, it may not show up on her background check because we have no reason to run a county record in Florida. It also means that the nanny could have committed a crime and wasn't caught. I mean, there's so, you know, you have to really be clear with families. During COVID, one of the biggest discussions I think that came out of it that we started having with families is that stress impacts people differently. Death impacts people differently. Life crises impact people differently. So the nanny who was solid, emotionally fine, able to do her job, duties and responsibilities at point A, could experience something as a result of the pandemic or as a result of not, but this was, you know, conversation that started evolving during the pandemic, and that, you know, she may be different and not respond the same way now. So it's essential to constantly monitor the quality of care that your kids receive. So I think being transparent about those things, reminding parents that they're the boss, right? That it's their hiring responsibility. It's their responsibility to monitor the quality of care children receive is super important. And that's a conversation that we always have. Did anyone else have any questions? So Emily, back to your question, I do think having a great application that sort of gets all of the objective criteria out there, and that when you do have the conversations, you're sort of focusing on those intangibles, and confirming the tangibles is super helpful and time saving. So you want to know before you're talking to the family, does the family have pets? You know, what are the duties and responsibilities? Do they understand their tax and payroll responsibilities? And you're providing them with all that information, because as we know, people don't always read. So sometimes you have to follow up in conversation, but you have a place to refer them back to. Knowing Nannies is the personality assessment resource. If you go to enannysource.com, you can find a link to that as well. They do personality assessments specifically developed for nannies. Do I have a price list you could suggest about the agency fee, please? No, no, do your research in your market. I'm not, no, I mean, no, I don't have a price list you could suggest about the agency fee. All fees operate, all agencies operate differently, right? So it's important that you understand what your market is, what your model of operation is. If you're doing full-time versus part-time, if you're the employer, if you're the referral agent, your agency fees are going to be different based on what you offer, where you live, what type of screening you're doing, all of that. So that's really a question that I can't answer, but certainly if you're looking for a consult, myself or several other industries, a professional certainly could guide you in the right direction, I'm sure. Any other questions? Oh, great. Someone's doing AI assistant. They're going to help take notes along the meeting. So that will be neat to see what notes came up. The models of care, we answered that. Okay, I think I got them all. Last call, if anyone has any questions versus chatter, you can unmute yourself. Well, thanks for sharing time with me today. Thanks for letting me share a little bit about what we've discovered in terms of models of care and how that has helped us with our matching and making long-term placements and investing the time up front to really understand the family's need versus what model the nanny works best in, because it does lead to less headaches down the road because you're making those match. The nanny comes away feeling fulfilled, like she's, living out her purpose in terms of care. Because we all know that when we talk to nannies, when they say, I fell into this, I can't imagine doing anything else. Those are the kind of nannies we all love to work with. And those are the nannies who seek fulfillment from their jobs. So it's important to find them jobs that they can operate in the model they naturally do best in. And for the families, especially first-time families, to help them understand what type of care they're looking for, to help take their express needs, to put it in that bucket of generalization for the models of care and fine tune as you go along the search, because sometimes what they think they want and what they actually need and want are two different things. And it's not the tangibles that's different, it's those intangibles. For example, they may say, hey, this really doesn't matter to me. And then they're into it and they realize that something was really important that they didn't know. So that's what I have for today. Thanks, Nahaya, for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Michelle. This was great. And thank you everyone who joined today as well.
Thank you, Michelle. Enjoyed seeing you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. I am going to end this meeting now.
Thanks so much.
And I'll send you that recording this week.